Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, good morning and welcome to the Business Blade Strategic Forum 2019, Predicting the Unpredictable. The opening event, organized in partnership with AmCham Slovenia, is AmCham Reinvention Breakfast, predicting the unpredictable, how to win in the flow of constant change. Please welcome Aisha Vodnik, CEO of AmCham Slovenia and Vice Chair of AmChams in Europe organization.
Dobro jutro, good morning. So predicting the unpredictable. Wow, let's see what will this breakfast bring us. But I know that it brought all of you, and I'm happy that after a long summer, we are again together and we will discuss many things. But one thing will remain the same, and we do not want to reinvent that AmCham Slovenia is the business community of optimism and opportunities. And that's the reason why we try to always find many positives, because there are in everything that we do. And also today, we will approach the topic of reinventing in this regard. So we will not reinvent the wheel, but we will have the strong will to make a good start of the business forum. And with that, I'm really happy that I can also warmly welcome the new ambassador to Slovenia from the United States of America, the lady in red, so welcome. And of course, say a big thank you to the partners, to Blade Strategic Forum. Every year, we are delighted that we can start with the Business Forum, and we are so proud that Slovenia has such a great platform to discuss important topics and, of course, to bring new values to the big, important topics. And also, let me say a big thank you to our partner today, to SNT. Sasha, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to our cooperation even in the future. But now, it will not be unpredictable who is the next speaker, so let's see.
Niko Slavnic, Professor, IEDC, Blade School of Management, MBA Professor, Serial Entrepreneur, Angel Investor and Keynote Speaker.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So it will be a pleasure to share with you the Big Five. When you go to South Africa, you have always to see the Big Five. So hopefully you'll see the Big Five animals also in Slovenia. It's just 5 theories, actually, that I will connect with the trends and predicting the unpredictable also today. So when we talk about the future, we have to start where? From our past. Kids, yesterday was first school day in Slovenia. It's important day, and that was my daughter before she went to school, of course. She was born original, but starting in the system, she's becoming maybe a bad copy. We don't know. But the process of our society is shaping us in some shapes that we will have to learn, and sometimes we'll have to unlearn. Why unlearning? Because the patterns that we do are usual, our patterns, and all the people also here were mostly repeating the morning coffee. Imagine that the coffee was poisoned. Predictions can be different. So how to reinvent our processes? I'll talk first about the global one of the first animals, about the Nassim Taleb black swan. So black swan is predicting is the first of the animals, and it's explaining the world future shift. So low probability and high impact, things that are happening and can have huge impact. Retrospectively, we all know, oh, of course this will happen. We know the resources that are really limited when we talk about, for example, petrol in Europe. Resources that are limited in the nature. So Nassim Taleb is explaining how the society, how to do unfragile things with different solutions. So how to reinvent, we can see from the past also Berlin Wall or 9/11 was explained with Nassim Taleb theory of black swan. But also today we are talking about Amazon forest, that we can predict already in advance what is happening. Can we influence? Whose decision is it? Is it ours as global perspective? Is it Brazilian? or it's maybe a local farmer that's trying to feed their child, going to the school. Whose decision should be made? We know that today the world is really connected, and whatever is happening, even some of the unfavorite trends can be very quickly shared with others. So speed of light or speed of information that is moving together. But today, the winners will be the one who can predict better, who can move and react as fast as possible after the unpredictable has actually happened. We can predict things. So the second animal that I will touch is the second trend that I will touch on the market, regions, countries that we can talk. We all know the blue ocean strategy. There's a lot of sharks in the ocean, in every market. So how to do the value innovation, how to create our lagoons in the markets. So markets that I see are changing all the time. And luckily, we are living in the most innovative territory of Europe. Actually, we are inventing a lot of countries in the last 20 plus years. So that's just one of the historic approach where we can see the background of our region. But actually new customers are born in this region. So maybe they were more ecological even before they discovered cars. That's a picture from Romania experience. But it's not only customers, also where we see the growth. Where we see the growth, I mean, luckily, yes, we joined OECD. It's a fantastic experience that we can be part of the developed world. But where the growth is actually in developing countries. And that's also part of this territory we can learn. Markets are exponential. We can develop different markets, we can build up markets, and that's why we move from markets to the next level of future. So what's happening with corporations? How to reinvent corporations? I mean, today we have to be aware, there's already 452 companies that are unicorns called, data from this week. 1.6 trillion evaluation of these companies. But even more interesting is there's 345 billion of money invested in these companies. They're in different game. They don't fight for profit and return on investment. You cannot compete with unicorns because their goal is not profit. Their goal is going to the stock exchange. So how to fight against corporations or fast companies that are growing up. Companies today, if you look at Fortune 500, 52% from year 2000 are not on the list anymore. But what we can do, you can see what SoftBank with the new 108 billion fund is doing, already the second one, joining family money from Arabs, from Russians, from Foxconn, Apple, even Microsoft, joining this and investing in companies with a much higher return on investment than any of the companies that are on the Fortune 500. So one of the examples is SoftBank, but we are talking about beyond corporate. It's not about just your industry. Companies are reshaping to investment, to accelerators, to different, not just hierarchy of the one industry. But big, it's not enough to be already big. It's important to be fast. So fastest are eating the small ones, not the big ones. When you talk about the product future shift, so on the product level, we have to do the unsafe thing. We have to reinvent our purple cow. We have to ask ourselves, why not doing some things? We don't want everybody to be our customer. We want our customers to be passionate about products. And one slide for the ladies more. Since I have background also in cosmetics, in the factory, actually, people are making cosmetics, but in drugstore, what we are selling, we can sell many packages, many products, from cheap ones to expensive ones, and this is actually coming from the same company, but we are selling emotions, we are selling hope, we are selling being always beautiful, wanted, and cosmetics is just transforming our emotions into products. When we talk also about how to bring emotions to the field, we have to talk about Slovenian chef Ana Roš also. And making and building different original product is what we want also our kids to be, to stay original, to stay themselves, not just to be a bad copy. And the last one, just to touch, is the individuals. Butterfly effect, you all know, and you can decide what effect you want to make global. You want to be a celebrity, become a leader, or maybe even becoming a superstar, like this one, Slavoj Žižek. There's a lot of power that can be influenced, and actually mass creativity is the one influencing. Combining individuals and leveraging their potentials is giving us power. So people plus media actually making power for all of us. You have to ask yourself, why not? Many times it's just the kick in the butt or inertia in something else to ask yourself, why the fuck not? Thank you.
Well, we asked Nico to give us food for thought, and wow, so many things. So with that, let's see what our panelists will say about that. And we'll invite the first one.
Joe Dumoulin, Chief Technology Innovation Officer, Vernt, Intelligent Self-Service.
So welcome, Joe, coming from US to Slovenia to hear that. What was the most interesting thing that you heard from Nico?
So for me, I think that the interesting part of what he's talking about is the bringing in of new methods of technology for innovation in business and also in social good.
Okay, great. So this is the first reaction. Please join us on the stage. And the next speaker will say what?
Martin Kaivats, National Digital Advisor, Government Office of Estonia. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, good morning and welcome to the
we are
Business
back.
Break.
Good morning. I hope you are waking up by now. So, Martin, you're basically advising the Estonia Prime Minister about how to be more digital. But what you learned from Nico, what was the thing that made you think, oh yeah, we are on the best path?
So for me, it's what Nico touched in the presentation, and what's important is predicting is really hard. This is a kind of witchcraft that everybody and probably a lot of people in this room are thinking that, oh, I have this magic stick and I know where the future is going, but really we don't. And for me, it's more about building a system architecture that actually withstands those changes, and that's what we're doing in Estonia.
Thank you for the first thought. Yeah, everyone would like to have a crystal ball, but it's also fun to live in unpredictable times. And our next guest will think what?
Joško Mrnče, Regional Director, Adriatics, Google.
Joško, welcome. If you would say one thing, what would be your first reaction on what we heard?
That the change is the only constant thing that surrounds us. So this is not that we can take things for granted, and as guys were saying, that we have to embed and live change and be fast and adaptable to it.
Google is important in bringing changes, but this will be the topic that we'll cover afterwards. And I will have another guest.
Gregor Potočar, Managing Director, Southeast Europe, SAP.
So welcome, Gregor. Which animal would you say is most important in this, what we heard?
I remember only this one, but I like the feelings part, so the emotions. Yeah, we can now measure those, so it's a good topic. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll cover it. And last but not least,
Matthias Sachs, Director of Corporate, External and Legal Affairs, Central and Eastern Europe, Microsoft.
So, Matthias, welcome. Your initial thought is?
I would add, excuse me, I would add two words to the picture of change he printed, or he painted. Disruption and transformation. And I think we see a lot of disruption and transformation these days. And I personally think this is super exciting, and I'm looking forward to our discussion here.
Me too, so welcome. Yeah, many things we did here, and we have three important players in this big change in terms of Microsoft, SAP, and Google, basically the biggest companies that are importantly changing our society. And with that, I would maybe like to start. We heard the fastest will be the ones who will change, but in reality, we see that your companies are really important in bringing reinvention and innovation. So maybe with that, can we start with you, Joško? How do you see it? Because changes are happening, things are different. Sometimes we even don't know where we are going. I think you should just push the button there, yeah?
Can you hear me, guys?
Much better.
Okay, cool. To your question, Aisha, I think, and I can maybe refer to a discussion I had recently, a few months ago. The big word was something that Matthias mentioned, and that is disruption and change. So if I look at it, I think it's completely inevitable, and it's inevitable for good. This disruption may have a bit of a negative connotation in its word itself. However, it is only disruptive for those who are not either adaptive or fast enough to change. If you look at historically from a final consumer or us perspective point of view, disruption was, for me, it means progress. If you look at the major inventions throughout the history, arrival of electricity, cars, airline traffic, all of these things are for the benefit of society. So I believe, regardless of the fact that we live and have a feeling of uncertainty, I think this overall competitiveness and thinking from a different point of view and different angle will actually give benefits to all of us in the longer run. And so I don't feel, as it was mentioned in Nico's presentation, 52% of 500 companies are, I believe, gone. And I believe among top 10 most worthy companies in the world, 7 of them are tech, which were not even existent 30 years ago. But for me, it is the pure development of how to be resilient, fast, and innovate. In that sense, I'm positive and optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Gregor, of course, we want to be optimistic, but in bringing constant change, we know that we need to adapt. And this was also pointed out. But it's not always easy, and it's really hard to decide how to do it. So as a society, or if you want as a company, or as a personality, so which part do you think is really hard for us to change something that we were used to?
Well, if you look from the society perspective, 100 or 200 years ago, you could live in the same situation your whole life. 3 generations were living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, working on the same field. Then things start to pace up a little bit. What we see now, it's really fast change. We call it disruption, but let's see, for me, I'm in technological business my whole career. This is not disruption, it's normal. But if you're coming from a, let's say, a mental pattern from 30, 40 years ago, this is definitely disruptive because it's a huge leap. We are living the change every day. I believe that the recipe for survival, probably, it's not a matter of evolution. It's actually a survival problem. It's that you change fast enough that the change becomes like a hobby. Also for the companies. Now we're reading all these Facebooks, LinkedIn stuff. So it's all about self-improvement and challenge and being better than yourself yesterday, or you're competing with yourself stuff. This has to happen to the companies too. And I'm coming from a 46 years old company, so it's older than me, and it's a German company, and it managed to reinvent itself a couple of times in the history. So it is possible. What will happen at the end? Nobody knows.
But should we, Matthias, worry about what will happen at the end? Because what basically the end is. So shouldn't we think, as Gregor pointed, like change is constant? Of course, we would rather say, can we please pace it down a bit because it's so fast? But how do you tackle that as a person, and how do you tackle that as a professional within Microsoft?
I personally feel super gifted to work for a company where change is happening so fast. And with our new CEO for the last couple of years, Microsoft has transformed significantly. And I don't have to elaborate, I think most of you know this, that we came from a licensed selling software company to a cloud-first and AI-first company. So we transformed, and I was part of that journey. I started with Microsoft when Steve Ballmer was still CEO, and the company turned to be a totally different company with Satya Nadella taking the lead. So that was an exciting change, and I really like what we are doing these days. And I talked to the colleague from Google before, and we said, we are on very similar path these days, which we totally weren't 10 years ago, let's say. So this is something super interesting, and I'm blessed that I work for this company here. And having a regional role and traveling all over CE all the time, so I'm almost every week in a plane going to some CE market, I see a lot of appetite for transformation, a lot of young, educated people thinking, what can we do about it? How can we help our country? What can we actually do here without leaving to go to the US or live in the UK or in France or Germany, but to stay here and do something about it? How can we become an entrepreneur in Slovenia or in Romania or in Bulgaria? And that is something very positive, I think. And I have the pleasure to be part of such discussions in so many markets where I feel I can talk about my own example, like what I can do in Microsoft, what I feel gifted to be here in this company, to give back something to the societies. And that's a responsibility big players like ourselves we have. We're not just going to a market and making revenue and paying some taxes and going out there, but we want to help transform these societies. And there's so much good to be done there. There's so much appetite for change. I mean, that sounds very, very positive, and you may say he's naive and there's a lot of downside to this, clearly, and we have to address that, and we have to talk about responsibility, accountability, and transparency, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. But at the same time, I think there's a very positive momentum here, and as the other speakers already indicated, we have to embrace change and disruption transformation as something positive. And I think there's a lot of potential, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, we have to tackle jointly, big and small.
Words that are all over the place, already becoming a buzzwords, I would dare to say, transformation, digital revolution, 4.0, and so on. Yeah, we all know where this leads, but at the same time, people tend to be afraid if we talk too much about disruption, revolution, and so on. And here, Martin, if I may, I would ask you, Estonia made a great story and a case how the whole country can become really, really excited and motivated for change. Is that also perceived when you're in Estonia, or is this a good story?
So I think the fundamental lesson learned from Estonia in building a digital society in the past 25 years is that technology has got very little to do with this. This is mainly about building a mindset of culture of change and opening and also changing the way administration and this nitty-gritty, stupid bureaucracy stuff actually works. So in Estonia, I don't think people themselves consider, so in working in this domain, our biggest problem is to actually make the local people understand that this is something different from the rest of the world. This has become normal, and in that it's positive. Because if people consider never using papers for the last 10 years for bureaucratic administration a normal thing, it's actually a foundation for something new. And this is what we are working on. But when I see other governments and corporations dying to do their strategical plans on digital transformation or whatever, then the problem is that although they say that this technology is only a tool, then technology has become a purpose in its own right. Although they can explain that, no, we use it only as a tool, they actually work in terms of getting all the gadgetry out there. No, it's not about the gadgetry, it's about culture and mindset, and that is something more fundamental than this technology can actually do.
And here maybe just a question, it sounds really easy, like now it's the culture, but we know it takes time, and we know that it's really, the first step is probably the most important. What would you say it was the paramount change that basically changed culture for Estonia? What was the moment in time? Was it a moment? Was it a process? Was it a person? So why and how you managed that the country is basically thinking that's the new normal?
So the moment in time was in 2001. They started before that, but critical moment was that. We made mandatory digital identity for all citizens and a mandatory data exchange layer called X-Road that is necessary for all government authorities to exchange information. That's it. most governments or corporations still don't have those very basic hygiene issues solved.
So sometimes it's important that things are mandatory, not just by choice, because we see many times that changes simply do not happen.
And what I would like to add, these are the only top-down decisions that we have made.
Okay. Okay, and then it needs to be around. Okay, good. Joe, you're an entrepreneur. In technological part, you know how important data is. You know AI and all that, but we are talking about society today, and we are talking about culture as well. So we are not in technology sense, but your feelings about this, because you are co-creating the society by doing and developing what you do.
Right. I think it's really important to see that there are multiple sides to this problem. From my perspective, I come from a mathematics background, and I find the whole idea of AI in the modern context to be just very, very interesting personally, okay? So this is how I got involved with it. But as we develop applications for large enterprises to try to use AI to actually solve problems and really to help others, to help the people that are already in those companies to make better analytical decisions and work with the vast amounts of data that they have more effectively, we begin to see some of the areas where we have issues with AI. There's a lot of them, and I think that there's some important ones that we need to discuss, not just in terms of culture, well, in terms of the culture of work, for sure, right? One example is that if you put an AI analytics tool in place in a company, you'll find that over time it becomes less and less useful. As decisions are made using it, the manner of decision-making changes, or the quality of the data will change, and you need to constantly prepare to change that artificial intelligence tool in order to find those issues. You need to look for issues that we've all seen in the news, the issues of bias in AI, mostly because of data. And what we'll find, looking at this, is you find that the algorithms that are used, as sophisticated as they are, and as often as they change, they're not really providing a lot of advancement in the AI world. What really is advancing AI in the modern times, in the last few years in particular, is the quality and quantity of data.
And here I need to jump in with the question of human intelligence, artificial intelligence, all the biases. But here, Martin, are you also in the lead as a country in this? Because we, as Slovenes, often say that we are the one to do it, because we have per capita the most AI engineers in the world. So you are getting the rival maybe there. But anyway, so are you in the lead also regarding the AI?
To my knowledge, currently we have 22 live applications of narrow artificial intelligence in the public sector. I know that Netherlands has roughly 18. I don't know anything. Probably China is doing a trick. But in it, I think, and in the next half a year, we will push another 50 different AI applications in the public sector. So a lot of different examples, a lot of different things in the pipeline. But what is fundamentally difficult and mission critical, not only for Estonia, but I would argue that for the world in general, is that, again, the system architecture that I mentioned in the very beginning is that in order to see the world now, we can see Chinese doing the centralized governmental control information system. The big brother from the Orwellian world has settled down in Beijing and is probably happy living there. And looking at some of the corporates that are also sitting here, or looking at the US type of data management, which is, I would call quasi-decentral corporate control data, where corporates are owning and controlling the data. Looking at from the Estonian and I would argue from the European perspective, both of these are not fully to our mind. So what we want to do is build this world of artificial intelligence with the human in the center. So human-centric AI ethics, and how to actually make it happen throughout the pipelines of governance, the private sector and everything. But this is very difficult to do from, and this is something that we are in the same ship as Slovenia. We are both small countries, actually, in this game.
We in Slovenia say we are the right-sized country. But anyway, Matthias and Joško, of course, I'll turn to you to comment on this.
No, I just wanted to emphasize maybe one word that is coming to my mind out of everything what has been said, especially in the light of the uncertainty of this change and what's happening. And my colleague mentioned disruption, which is around us, and people have to cope with it. I think the key word is education. Education in general, not necessarily just for the, let's say, few who can actually afford it or realize the potential trends, but I would say society in general, extremely important. There is a really strong study which was publicized recently in the last 6 or so more months. It's called Digital Challengers. It was done by McKinsey. And it actually, and by the way, there is Slovenia panel for you guys who haven't seen it. There is for Croatia as well. So I really encourage you to see it. It basically tells where we are in benchmark when it comes to digitization with digital frontrunners. Estonia is, by the way, one of them, and especially Scandinavian countries. And when you look at the gap, so what is happening in our countries is that on one hand side, you have part of the brain drain. On the other hand side, you have aging population. You realize that 40 or 50% of your population still do not have basic digital skills, let alone artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all the sophisticated stuff. So to embrace this culturally, these people have to have access to the basic knowledge of overall digital skills. In 2030, I believe that 90% of newly created jobs in EU will require basic digital skills, 90%. And if you think 10 years before that 40 or 50% of your population does not have even the basic ones, then there is the issue. And just maybe to conclude on my part, in order to solve this, I think it's on us, companies, and we can talk more what are we doing about it, but it's about governments, it's about public sector, it's about educational system to give access to all of these people to really good quality, at least basic information, in order to embrace the culturally digitization, which is not coming, but it's already here.
Mm-hmm. And with that, Matthias.
I would like to build on two things having been said. First is, I really like the human-centric approach to AI. I think this is absolutely critical and super important. And we put on top of that, or beside that, the idea of democratizing AI. So AI should be available to everyone. It should really be democratized. That is super important. And the second piece here I want to build on is the education aspect you mentioned. I think this is super critical. I mean, let's face it, and that's where education starts. Let's talk about what is already happening, what is already here. We heard narrow AI, take machine learning. These things are reality in so many parts. And so many people don't know that all these sensors around us are actually smart devices. And so many data points are collected these days. So a lot is happening there already, and many people aren't aware of that. And when you add to this the education piece and think about the younger population, there needs to be education about the fact that this is reality, this is happening, we are advancing this, and we are outpacing ourselves once in a while, especially when it comes to public dialogue and policymakers. And that's something we have to be very transparent about as big corporations, that these things are super critical and we have to address it. And I like the idea of us not being dragged into discussions like this, but us stimulating these discussions by ourselves and coming up with our very own ideas here. I think this is something we should be held accountable for. And
responsibility and purpose is something that more and more the companies understand that is critical. And with that, I'll give the word to our next food for thought speaker, and we'll continue afterwards. Please.
Ina Kuković-Borovnik, founder Bela Voda.
I need to take the mic because I cannot stand behind the counter. I have 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a very short time to say something smart about reinvention, food for thought, to say why I'm part of this debate, and hopefully engage a little bit more than just your rational mind. Okay? So that's 30 seconds in. Speed. speed of change has actually been a part of conversation that was starting this morning. And I want to bring a bit of perspective, what that really means, speed of change. Why don't we love change? I mean, I know you love change, you are in that kind of industry, but most of us don't really love change. Why? Human species has been around on this planet for more than 200,000 years. I'm talking about Homo sapiens, yeah? And change has been a very rare occurrence, really. We needed more than 198,000 years to take a picture of our planet, of where we live. This is the blue marble picture. I don't know if you know it. It's from 1972, taken by Apollo 17. I mean, thinking about the speed of change, we needed a long time to develop and see our planet and where we live. That's why I'm talking about the speed of change. Only 50 years from that moment, we're sitting today on this panel talking about artificial intelligence, invisible governments, living on different planets, managing resources. 50 years. That's a very short time. So our brain, our bodies, our systems, our ways of organizing are not built to reinvent. They're built to last, because change was a rare occurrence in the past for a very, very long time. So this sudden switch of loving change, oh yeah, let's change all the time, is really not so easy. That's why organizations don't love change. Yeah? Who loves change here? Okay, you can admit that yes, sometimes, right? Sometimes. That's the speed of change. So our brain is not wired for the speed of change we are facing today in our environments. Reinvention, the answer. It's a skill. I want to explain how I see, or we see, reinvention. It's a special skill we need to revive and be really good at. Really good at. It's about life. It's not just about survival, I hope. It's about changing our attitudes towards change. Yeah? How do we love change? How does that become something we do as a hobby? Yeah? So we see reinvention as a form of anticipating, designing, implementing change. A system that enhances the mindset and the cultural change we need to make. Remember the 200,000 years and the 50 years? Yeah? It will take some time. So reinvention is about life, and it is a system, and it is a concept where we need to change our minds. A few facts. Is business ready? Nico mentioned one, but I have a different 3 numbers I think are very powerful for a business setting. 88% of companies, the best 500, Fortune 500, are gone in the last 60 years. So somewhere in between, we took that picture of the planet, right? 88%. 50% are planned to die or be gone in the next 10 years. 10 years. More bad news. 75 of our transformation efforts in organizations fail. They fail. We're not good with dealing with change. Yeah? We don't really love change. But there's good news. More than 3/4 of the reasons why these companies sank in the past were within their control. Yeah? So it wasn't about the technology, not knowing the technology. Yeah? For, you know, the Kodak and Nokia, the famous stories, right? They had the technology, they didn't give it out. Right? It wasn't about not knowing. Yeah? It was about not being able to handle all that change coming with that in the organization. Business cycles, the speed of change, shortly. 75 years, that was in the 80s. In the 90s, something called internet happened, yeah? Opening up China, Berlin Wall. The business cycle shortened up to 15 years. What do you think it is today? Guesses? Because I'm on 5 minutes and over. 7 years cycles, we asked. We did our own research. And you actually need to reinvent yourself and your company every 3.5 years. Do you? Our company is ready. Another part of our research, you can see all Fs. So no matter the size, no matter the role, we give ourselves an F when it comes to reinvention. There's too low commitment, too low efficiency to actually make reinvention happen. Yeah, we all know we need to change. We all know we need to love it. But we actually are still not giving enough resources in terms of money, people, ideas to make reinvention happen. Just one other insight. In terms of the size of the companies that are over 1,000 employees still have a hard time because they still need to explain why change is needed. You would think that's already clear. When it's a smaller company, less than 1,000, it's a question of what do we need to reinvent. And this goes back to what Nico said and what was mentioned. It's about the value. Yeah? What is the value we are bringing? And since I'm way over time, I want to, 5 minutes at the end, reframe. Reinvention is about trying to look at things from a different perspective. So I want to give 3 questions on 3 levels for that 5 minutes. What if you, as an individual, would take 5 minutes of your time every day not to do anything, to just be, just observe? I know, not do. I know. It's like we're not built for that, right? It needs to be action all the time. And see what kind of reinvention might come out of that. As an organization, what would happen if you would give 5 minutes of every hour, every day to every employee, which comes up to 1 hour every day, for them to think about how they can reinvent their product, their service, their business model, your culture? Like really give that time to them in their working time? And for us as society, and maybe as a matter of conversation now, why don't we take 5 more minutes in the perspective of the 200,000 years we're around to really think about how we want to evolve? Not just in terms of technology, which obviously we're really good at, but in terms of the soft skills, the reinvention skills, the different intelligences of political intelligence, visioning intelligence, emotional intelligence has been around for a long time. We still didn't really accept it in a way. Yeah. So that's food for thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ina. Great views to discuss on. And then again, talking about 5 minutes, we always say we don't have time, right? But we have another 70 minutes to discuss this. And with that, I would maybe start with you, Matthias. You said that Microsoft managed to reinvent itself. And as I asked Martin, what was the critical point that basically all of you, employees and the leadership, made it? Because we do have a feeling that Microsoft is up again.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I guess I have an answer to that. There's one word which is quite common, it's culture. And it was a culture change initiated by our current CEO when he took office. He said we should focus more on the customers, we should focus more on the human beings, we should move away from just thinking about profits and shareholder value. And he had a different view on products, let's say it very broadly, and looked at cloud as the thing. Since he came from the cloud business, he was running the cloud business for Microsoft before he took the lead for the company as such. And he changed our thinking about culture and how we should approach the outside world as Microsoft and what kind of corporate citizen we want to be. That was the major thing. And that kind of resonated with people. And almost all colleagues I could think of really liked that and said that's something new and interesting. We should try to think how we can embrace it.
Because you found purpose in it? Or what was the trigger that you really wanted to do it? Because we know that every time we have business leaders here, when a new one comes, we want changes, sometimes also just for the changes. But then how do you persuade that many people that they want to do it?
First thing I'd say is that Satya himself, he's very credible in doing that. He lives that, he's true by heart. So I believe him, and not just because he's my CEO, but I think because he believes in himself. So that's something pretty important. And then this down-to-earth, feet on the ground, human-centric approach, this democratizing so many things, this being more transparent, being really accountable and responsible. I think that resonated with a lot of people because they wanted to be that person, not that big corporation doing business somewhere, but being a part of the very society they are living in and feeling a purpose why they are doing this, because we want to do something good here. I'm not talking about good, since this is the Google motto here. This is for you guys. Don't be evil, be good. But we try to be a little bit better as well, I think, and that was meant serious.
And here, Gregor, if we go to you, SAP as a German company, you mentioned that. Why did you mention German? Is that something different then? And how do you do it? How do you do the change? Because it's more than obvious that SAP is working great and that change is happening.
First, change. Let me start with change. So I will refer to you. So I don't believe that we are wired that we don't like change. So I'm being provocative back. Yeah? Because we didn't have a chance to change. Yeah? So 500 or 1,000 years ago, if you were living in these woods, there's nothing you can change, a lot. Yeah? Small changes, maybe, not revolutionary. Yeah? But hence the religions appear. So we have hope for the next life. In this life, it is what it is, but in next life, yeah, it will be much better. But now we can actually change during our lifetimes, yeah, and during our company's lifetimes. This is different. But then again, I don't see it's a big drama that companies disappear. Companies, they have a purpose. Purpose of making money, period. Yeah? The companies we're talking about today. And the companies are actually being merged to some others or carefully dismantled, yeah? And on these ashes, as we call it, a new companies appear. So it's okay, it's like a fertilizer. Yeah? They don't disappear as they are. We as a really big, old companies, yeah, we're a bit different because we are too interconnected with business and society. So what changed for us first is now that we are working together. So as SAP, as our customer, you can say, I want to work on Microsoft infrastructure. I want to have my SAP applications on Microsoft infrastructure or Google. Actually, we don't care. So we're becoming a platform for new businesses. Yeah? And a lot of businesses are being acquired by large corporations. This is also how Microsoft grows, by Google and by SAP. And with that, we're bringing a huge cultural change into this old corporation. Maybe I mentioned German because German has a really good legislation, labor legislation. So it's hard to do anything there or to change people in a way that American companies can do it. But let's say last year and this year, we changed almost 5,000 people through smart programs. This is huge investment to do this. But it's a bit forced. This is a bit top-down. Yeah? But internally, we're bringing huge cultural change by bringing new companies into SAP Realm or our platform. And we don't merge them like, forget about everything that was before, now you're SAP. Yeah? No, we're not. So we leave them there, and we take the good stuff, and then we blend everything, and then we change also SAP. And this, I believe it works really well at the end. Yeah? So we can execute the change now, and we are the change platforms now. Because at the end, AI, it's still a technology. Yeah? We're talking about technology. And if we're saying technology, this is not dressing technology. It's just a suit. So when we will come to that AI is not something as a technology, but it's everyday decision-making stuff, and we can put them in the real processes, then we did our homework. And we will do it through business, apparently, because it's a bit faster.
Josko, here I need to turn to you. Google many times is perceived as a force that is changing not only itself, but also society, because yeah, on the one side, maybe we are afraid sometimes, but on the other side, you mentioned education and empowerment, which is there that everybody basically can get to it. And more than ever, anybody can have information and be really decisive if, of course, one wants to. So it's really not limited to just those who are in a special schools, boarding schools, and so on. So what's your point on that?
There are actually two components to this reinvention overall thinking. I would just go a little back to the present and challenge a little bit this, if you could, work for 55 minutes and then spare 5 minutes for innovation and think about stuff. In all fairness, I don't know about you, it doesn't work for me. I cannot plug in my innovative brain and plug off my whatever I'm doing at the time. So I think at first it's about really creating an environment for innovation in general. From a corporate point of view, I think, in my case, in my experience with Google, extremely important psychological safety, being who you are, really expressing yourself in a respectful manner, and then with this brainstorm of equal ones, you really come to the sum point of something. I think that's extremely important. And then it's the creation of setup that change is inevitable anyhow, with us or without us. It's going to happen. There's, as we speak, there are brilliant minds all over the place in the world looking at a problem from a different angle. And if you look at even companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, these brilliant inventions or search engines or social media, they didn't come from a corporate 100,000 people who would say, let's think about the new. It came from a garage, from two different brilliant brains. So I'm a big believer that you have to create a setup where innovativity will come as a natural process. That is one thing. And when it comes to Google itself, and thank you, Matthias, for this mantra of don't be evil, it's really about creating value for everyone. So my personal feeling and the company's overall feeling is, if we make, as our mission statement is, to make information universal, accessible, and usable for everyone, the world will become eventually a more democratic place. With the arrival of new, more sophisticated tools, machine learning, artificial intelligence, some of the jobs, unfortunately, will disappear or will be replaced by automation. But we will have more time for creativity. We'll have more time to create and invent things. And therefore, because of it, I'm an optimist in that sense.
Martin, maybe if I may go to you in terms that you mentioned corporations and states, being European or being American, Chinese. What's your point on that? Who should be in the lead and why? Is it, maybe I got it wrongly, why it should be political leaders and not business leaders with the purpose? So what's your take or point on that?
So it's very difficult who should be in the lead. It's like, sorry, we're a country of 1.3 million people. We cannot be a significant player in the artificial intelligence cutting edge domain. Chinese and the US and probably these companies have much bigger budgets and better know-how in dealing with it. But what I'm arguing for is for building governance in a way that human actually has a say in it. And this is not only a political leadership, but it's also kind of a civic agenda. Because philosophically, I think we could argue that as we see the rate of change in the next, we can guess the rate of change speeding up, and we can look at the world with artificial intelligence and lots of other fancy gadgetry. In the next 10 to 15 years, we can argue that it's either the US corporates or the Chinese government who will be controlling your mind, basically. We want to give an option. We want to give a build way that, together with also with the companies sitting in this panel, to create that option in a way that human always has this option. And And this is not a very simple task. If you go down the nitty-grittiness of data management, and like in Estonia, we can say that we're the only country who can say that we are the owners and in control of our own data. But that mainly refers to data that is within the governmental domain. Today, people give much more data away, also to companies sitting here, than they ever give to the government. So, and then they start whining about that I don't trust the government. At the same time, Facebook knows everything about them. It's about raising awareness within the citizens themselves to want to have a choice. Because at certain levels, this goes into the very, very high complexity and technical complexity. Most people don't need to know about it, but they need to have a certain interest in it. So raising awareness and for the world, I think it's critical because we want to show that it can be done, so that other countries could potentially follow and show that this kind of. So basically, the main thing is not to have centralized data systems, like not to have the one ring to rule them all, so that we would have an option and building distributed architecture systems throughout the whole governance domain. But yeah, something around that.
So do you think that the civil society is knowledgeable enough and motivated enough, basically, to be active partner and discusser in this, how this should be done? Because apparently not even political or business leaders, but we need probably also the third part, people to be organized.
Yeah, not necessarily. That's the complexity of it. But I think the way you build system architecture, the way you build systems that make the data move, and build the culture and mindset in the next 15 to 20 years. This is something that we've seen in Estonia once. We've seen that. We've seen the transition of thinking from a paper-based system to a digital system. That is fairly understandable, paper, digital. But what we see with artificial intelligence, it's much more complex. It's basically from a linear industrial-based system to something non-linear, where an answer can pop out from there, and it's not necessarily lean management that helps you to get there. So you cannot constantly make it even better and then come to the conclusion, but the conclusion can come from various locations. But how do you build a culture that withstands that? That is much more, a bigger complexity than from paper to digital. From linear to non-linear, building a culture is much more complex. So, but I have hope for that, basically systems thinking and complexity theory and these kind of things in more fundamental sciences have evolved throughout the past 15 years, and bringing this type of knowledge to the general society, that not necessarily it's a linear communication, but it can be like several components in this equation and the relationships between them. If we make people to understand them and also to speak this linguistic paradigm, then hopefully we can come to a bigger understanding. But I don't know, I'm a positive dreamer, so let's see how it works out.
Let's stay optimistic. And with that, Joe, you are a mathematician, you're a developer. Do you think about these things when you develop things, or you just want to be even more complex and then interesting? Because I always ask myself when I see mathematicians, do you use also divine mathematics? Well,
I mean, as far as the applications go, of course, I love to do this. I will spend my time on the airplane, or, you know, if I have some time in my hotel room while I'm here, I'll be working on some problem just to see, maybe I have an idea while we're sitting here, I'm listening, and it's very interesting, lots of interesting ideas. And I think about, you know, what can I do? What is a way that I can manipulate this certain data and try to find interesting patterns, okay? But at the same time, I can see lots of, I am confronted by the problems of, you know, artificial intelligence pretty much all the time. And within the scope of any given experiment, there are many, many issues that come up. I mentioned earlier data, and I think that, that for me, that's the most present, because The algorithms, again, are very easy. Well, they're complete, okay? And the learning methods are complete. The problems come about with getting the correct data to solve the problem, to getting a question that corresponds to the data, those kind of things. For any given data set, there may be many, many questions that you can answer from it. But often what happens is we try to answer a question with the wrong data, data that is not capable of answering that question. This is a very, very common problem right now with AI. And I think that those are the areas that are going to change in the technical side of artificial intelligence in the near future. The other thing to confront is that we call this artificial intelligence and we throw around this word AI. It's very almost glib, okay? But we really don't understand what intelligence is. We don't understand what our intelligence is. Really, there is no good definition of intelligence. It's one of those things like the Supreme Court said one time about something. They said, we know it when we see it, right? You will know it when you see it. Well, this is exactly what intelligence is like for us, and we really don't see it in what we call artificial intelligence as of today. Okay, it's just not there. There's many more things to do in order to have that happen.
Interesting point, but what we want to see always is to be able to trust, because as Joško said, psychological trust and safety is really important, and then safety, security, and this will be the topic that Uroš Majcen will address, so let's hear from you.
Uroš Majcen, Head of Security Operations Center, S&T.
Yeah, it is now. Like a rock star, had to be very close to the microphone. Well, sadly, for most of you here, I'm in a business of predicting the unpredictable in the security space. That means if things are getting faster, if there's more data, it's more available, there will be more. My job is to make it more secure. Well, and some others, of course. Are we winning in this battle? I will give a couple of points, will be food for thought to talk about it, what we have seen recently, what we are discovering, and how we are facing this. You all know this. Every year they come up, this is the Internet Minute. You see, this is now what's happening in 1 minute in our world. If you think there are a lot of things happening here, I'm going to point out a couple of ones, is, of course, it's a change. It's like constantly, always a change. We see a lot more data coming up. We see a lot of more channels from where data is originated, how people are changing the way they think, how people are changing the way they act daily. As you've seen, the transition, for example, in the streaming industry, and these are the main players. One of these, for example, I'll come up like instant messaging. That's disrupted the business of messaging. We've seen the social media here high up. So these are all the channels where we, as a persons, leave our digital footprint. So are we secure in leaving the digital footprint here, or are the companies secure? What we have seen here, and I'll come up, it's a lot of data, a lot of things happening. What we are facing is that we have wrong methods of reacting to them. This is the defense in depth strategy that most of the companies are adopting. It means I will be like a fortress. I will have multiple layers, and my prime domain, my data, which is my intellectual property, will be in the middle. And I will have all of these guarding my data. So if we do this, and we spend gazillions of dollars of money in this, and we are failing. So if this a right strategy then? That's the number one question we need to ask ourselves. Are we inherently having some things flawed, wrong in our architecture because of that? And can we address this correctly? So what do we see here is we went up for a wrong target. I'll give you a very simple example is here. You know, ransomware, you've seen some effects recently. This is a huge business. This is unbelievably huge business. It's also fueling with the insurance industry. Why? Because insurance companies are paying up the bribes. You know that, and it's a vicious circle. So, you know, when you see the movies and they're saying don't negotiate with terrorists, Here we are negotiating with them, and we're giving them more interest to do more business. Why not? Why the hell not? This is easy target. Some of these streams of ransomware are generating more than $2 billion annually. This is such a huge business. It's such an easy business for them that is unbelievable, and it's a good target. Started easily by governments promoting this using vulnerabilities, and now it has exploded. This could be a guy sitting somewhere in Thailand on a beach and actually encrypting your data. And you don't even know about it. You will know when the phone starts ringing, right? Of course. So actually 7.3 days on average when we can bring the company up. And this is where insurance companies are coming here, because they're saying, okay, 3 to 4 days if you pay up. So it's business logic, let's pay up. This is what they're doing. And now we have a problem, because again, it's a vicious circle. That's average cost. That has gone up exponentially in the past several months. I'll give you another slide. This is the one that's causing most of the problems right now in the USA. 23 municipalities in Texas, core system in Atlanta. Here in Slovenia, we had examples of this. And this is the price of Bitcoin. You see the shift here, why that's gone up here? That's supply and demand. That was the demand, not by legitimate business, but those that are paying with Bitcoins. Think about it, how as a business, we're always coming back to the point that there will always be a business interest no matter what we do, if it is legitimate or illegitimate type of operation. So what we're doing wrong here, I think about what it is, we have to look at it from the point of healthcare. Inherently, we as humans have flaws. This is a string of DNA from the pancreatic cancer. We can have it, we don't even know it because it's in our genome, right? So imagine that you have an architectural flaw in your system and you don't even know about it. The bigger you get, the more you expand vertically, horizontally, the bigger target you get. An outside factor, like in the cancer, could be something, triggers this in your company. And you haven't even known about it until the moment it has occurred. So why? It is because we had wrong approaches in the past. We spent a lot of money in the prevention and control, and that was a necessary but clearly not sufficient approach. Because why? Because right now, when we have all this data, all this change, everything, we no longer have a central fortress that we need to protect. Data is everywhere. As Matthias said, it could be decentralized. It's no longer one thing that you see in your data center. We point about detection. We're spending money now in detection. It's wrong, because the moment you do detect, you might be in a problem. The problem is here is the containment. So as I am in the battlefront of this battle in Slovenia, I'm saying this is the battlefront that we are having. The battle line is in the containment. No longer here. This is where we lost the battle completely. It's the containment. Containment means like in healthcare. There will be people who will get flu every year. That's inedible, right? There will be people, unfortunately, who might die out of it. But if they can contain it, it's okay. That means among, let's say, 1,000 workstations, if 20 are contained and I can get rid of them and install fresh, I'm okay, I can live with that. But from the business point, there are other problems. So I'll give you one more food for thought. What if you can trade, let's say, 20% of your performance for a better security? Who will say yes? I'll come up now, yeah. All right, that was it. I'm in my time, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Even security, we need to reinvent and think differently, and probably that's really hard because we are wired to think the same, but then we need to change. And with that, I really want to open up debate also for you, because I saw a lot of nodding, a lot of talking also. So in Slovenia, when you say who does want to go first, everybody jump. So let's see if this changed. So who would like to go first? Lady Judge, very happy that you're with us, so please.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the panel. It was a brilliant, brilliant conversation, and to the thought provokers. Frankly, I'm with you. I'd trade 20% of performance for security any day of my life. I want to talk about the downside a little bit of change, just for 1 minute. We all know that the world is changing dramatically, much faster, we said, in 50 years than many years before. What do we do now about the people who are left behind? The people whose jobs will never be the same. The people where the robots or AI or all of the things you've been talking about will take away their jobs. And they're 50 years old, and nobody is going to invest in retraining them, teaching them how to use a computer. Probably they're in the lower half of society, but they have families and they have mortgages. What do we do about them now as we embrace the future?
Thank you so much. So maybe, can we start with you, Matthias? Do you have any programs? And then Joško, Gregor?
I wanted to say education and skilling, but you said it yourself, if someone is 50 plus, he's not necessarily going back to school. That is true. But still, we would go for that. That's the main approach we have here as Microsoft, at least. Go for mint education for younger populations, and then for the elderly, the same thing. And I would say you have two sides to the coin. So it is true that these people might be in danger to lose their jobs, but at the same time, their lives are getting better too, through various services they can enjoy, through various tasks they are going to be easier for them. So it's a mix. And I mean, we have to be honest here. We can't save everyone. We're going to have some people going to be left behind. That is what will happen. And we have to fight that it's not going to be a huge number. And we have to do what we can. And we can only do this jointly, since this has to be addressed by politics. And we are discussing with politics, since we are initiating these changes big times with our products and services, which is true. And so we are responsible, and we have to find others to discuss how we want to do this, how we address this jointly. And this is a 360 thing that needs to be tackled by a society as a whole. And we want to be a major part of that discussion. That's what I would say here. I mean, I can't say we're going to solve it, but we, as the initiator of many of these changes, have the responsibility to foster dialogue here.
Joško, what's the approach of Google?
Yeah, I'll give you, well, first of all, thank you very much for your comment. I think it's extremely valuable. I'll give you two very concrete examples that are ongoing, in fact, from Google's side. There is a program with Google called Grow with Google, where we have already trained 10 million Europeans on basic digital skills in different, it's Europe, Middle East, and Africa, where people will get basic digital skills, not necessarily just about Google tools, but digital in general, and we will continue to do so. That is one part. The second part is there is something called google.org, which is an organization that funds educational good initiatives, not necessarily just for the aging population. But I'll give you an example. In Croatia, in particular, where I come from, we're partnering up to digitize libraries and schools where kids can come in and try to code something, and then their parents or grandparents come in. So somehow to demystify this overall digitalization story. But I think it's not necessarily just about us. We're extremely important as a part of our corporate governance and responsibility. However, I think it's about the entire society. So if there is any program, especially for elderly people, to figure out just the basic stuff, not necessarily even to have some business potential coming out of it. My mother, she's 77 now. She figured out how to exchange photos through WhatsApp. I know to you sounds like, what? For her, it's a revelation. The woman is happy, she's enjoying things. So if we can have society that invests, not just for the obvious ones, which are businesses, and especially for the small and medium businesses, because bigger corporations already part of this knowledge. but in programs exactly for the elderly ones where they can get to the basic digital skills, and then most importantly with part of the overall education system that kids are just getting up to date with everything what is going around us.
Martin, how Estonia is tackling that? Your demographics, you have many young people, but anyway, how do you tackle the talents who are older than some age, or not even talents, or the left behind?
So actually, the example comes from how we started off this digitalization with projects similar that were just mentioned. In 1995, we had a program called Tiger Leap, which was a private-public partnership. Basically, private companies, mainly banks and telcos, paid for the digital education of 18% of the whole society. Basically, banks and telcos realized Estonia is a sparsely populated country, so private sector realized that for them it's reasonable to pay for the digital education of the least fortunate and the elderly, mainly, so that in 10, 15 years' time they can basically cut down on office spaces in areas. So, but that actually kicked off this whole change. So. Education still, but already from the very, very early beginning, now we can already see results of this transformation and this educational program. Basically, online dating for elderly is big in Estonia. And it's it's really like, and this is we couldn't imagine that, because if your partner has died, then of course using internet helps to find somebody. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is fully included, and it's not as peachy as it sounds. But still, education has helped in Estonia a lot. The internet penetration is relatively high compared to others. And also in that particular elderly and least fortunate part of the society. But that already started in 1995, so this takes a lot of time and effort. And yeah, so this has helped Estonia a lot.
It's always about time, and we are running out of it. So that's why I'll ask for final thought, 30 seconds each. We heard a lot, many things to basically think about, but also feel about. So now I ask just to go from Joe's side, one final thing that you want us to remember about today, or even advice for this region, for Slovenia.
I think that the main interesting thing for me, and I think that what would be a good takeaway for this, is that there are a number of important cornerstones to implementing and understanding how to use effectively this kind of tool. I think that the social aspect and the cultural aspect is very, very important. I really enjoyed the emphasis on that in this conversation. I think educating the populace and helping people understand better how to use artificial intelligence in the context of their job and in their life in the society. I also appreciate the bringing up this issue, which is in the United States at least is extremely important and significant issue, and will be. I'd love to talk to you more about it. But
thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
30 seconds out, and then Martin.
So, sorry, this is my, okay, it's my fifth time in Slovenia, but first time in a professional capability, so I don't know the Slovenian system that well. But I travel roughly 60% of my time, and I would argue that 98% of countries actually lack a plan of digitalization. Yes, bureaucrats make some big pieces of documents to make them look worthwhile, but in reality, they don't. I don't know the situation in Slovenia, but I can guess it's something similar. So actually having a plan would help. And the first step in order to make that plan, the Slovenian society or countries in general, and I don't know the Slovenian system, so maybe I'm making a mistake, you have to decide who owns the data. That's a very simple discussion. In the back end, the legal requirements, and that was very complex. But is it the corporates, is it the government, or is it the human or the citizen? Start with that. I think the ownership of data discussion is something that we need to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Joško?
My three quick takeaways from this discussion Change is inevitable, guys, with or without us. So the sooner we embrace it, the better we will be off, at least mentally, that we know that we have to be up to date with things. The second one is education, an absolute key on all different levels, whether it's individual, whether it's a company basis, and especially when it comes to society solidarity. And three, you mentioned Slovenia. I think Slovenia as a country is well positioned there. I think you guys are okay, not as far as some digital front runners like Scandinavian countries, but really it has all the requirements in order to continue on this path, and we as a company will continue to contribute in that sense and support all the good initiatives, especially when it comes to education.
Thank you. Gregor?
Well, I have a luxury of working on the whole Southeast Europe, so I can do some comparisons. And Slovenia was and it is a technological jewel of Southeast Europe, like a Silicon Valley, yeah, since 20 years probably or more. What we are lacking is a healthy bond between society and technology now. So we can do it in the business perspective. Yeah, we could export more, let's say. But as a next step, I see the problem is basically in execution. So we have a bunch of plans, yeah, good ones, bad ones. But on the topics we are covering, we could agree in 2 days what to do in some land and expand manner. So start small, maybe with municipality, do a digital municipality, expand, you know, and hospital and city and
so
stuff
there
like
is a solution.
Just
it's not a problem, it's a solution.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Gregor. And last but not least, Matthias.
I would like to see more public dialogue. I think there's a lot of potential here. You'll have a lot of great researchers, especially on AI in this country. And we need to talk more about this. And I would like you as experts and stakeholders of various kinds to challenge corporations like myself or others here to have this dialogue. And the same goes for your politicians. I mean, last week I was here, had some ministry meetings in Ljubljana, and I think that was fruitful and interesting. And we have to have more of that. And I'm on a positive note here, and I think Slovenia is in a good spot. As you said, I have a regional role as well, and I can compare. And I think you guys have a lot of smart people in your country here, and you can do something about it. So let's have that dialogue, and let's think out of the box. Think out of the box. That's my last sentence here.
So thank you so much, and I'm so happy that AmCham is always about collaboration and dialogue, and we'll take that advice. And with that, I would usually say grab a coffee, but because of change, I'll say grab a tea and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the AmCham Reinvention Breakfast. You are now kindly invited to grab a coffee and join us for other parts of the Business Blade Strategic Forum.